Okay, it is Thursday, July 2nd, and I don't want to jinx us, but we're having another quiet week, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, quiet week, it's all kind of relative. Like, has there been any kind of crazy TeamPCP slash, DPRK Shai Hulud style attack? No. But I mean, NPM malware is at an all-time high. So
Yeah,
like,
well, fair. I was talking to somebody back on Monday this week who wanted to know if I thought we'd seen the last of TeamPCP, if they've retired. I don't think so. It's interesting that we haven't seen anything notable from them in a few weeks, but let's not poke that bear.
well, I have a mini update.
Oh, let's hear it.
I can't go into a ton of detail, but I think one of the main, and I'm on record as saying, I did the Sans podcast last week. I'm on record saying TeamPCP is really just one person. Like exploiters and some of the other people, those are additional people, but TeamPCP is really just one person. And they might be in flight. We'll just leave it like that.
Yeah.
And by flight, I mean fleeing. I think we're going to have something important to talk about soon. Oh, actually, speaking of which, gosh, I didn't put this on the agenda. I'm sorry, everybody. This is off script, but
go for it.
The FBI posted a, the cyber equivalent of their wanted poster for TeamPCP today. So,
I missed that.
Yeah, sorry.
I would share it.
Yeah, I'll find it right now and send it to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, while you're searching the internet, though, I think I can probably find it pretty quickly as well.
I got it right here.
Yeah. Let's come back to that. And the first topic on our agenda is something that both of us, I think, is good news. GitHub released 2 changes last week, and I will say, kind of quietly released. The only reason I knew that these had happened is because of other accounts that I follow. I haven't seen GitHub be very loud about it. I will talk about them one at a time, kind of in the order that I found out about them. It's a slightly different order when they came out. But the first thing I learned about is that NPM has added what they're calling preventative account protection for high impact accounts. And what that means is if one of these high impact accounts changes the email address associated with the account, there is an automatic, changes the email address or uses a 2FA recovery code, the account is placed on an automatic 72-hour read-only hold, and an alert gets sent to the previous email address. And what this does is this creates a mechanism when the maintainer gets locked out by a threat actor. The threat actor can't actually do anything with the account. So the things that they said in the announcement that they freeze are not an exhaustive list. They're saying that it's security related things. Let me see if I can find the list. Publishing, managing tokens, changing package visibility, modifying org or team membership. So all of that is frozen. So this only applies to what they call high impact accounts, which they don't define in this blog, but from what I've heard kind of through other channels, might be packages with more than 1 million downloads. So, very popular accounts. And, the goal here, again, is to shut down one of the more common, but not exclusive account takeover mechanisms. So this is going back to, I guess, the human path being exploited. If somebody gets locked out, for example, we saw a lot of those social engineering related attacks earlier and last year where the attacker would get a hold of something related to the maintainer's account. For example, they might send them a phishing email or something like that. They would use that to gain access, change the email, get them locked out, etc. There's also circumstances where the attackers have gained access through other means and choose to change the email as a delaying tactic so that the genuine maintainer doesn't know or can't do anything about an attack. What it's not going to protect against is these other, more machine path type attacks. If they can get into the pipeline, if they don't need to change the email address or, use a 2FA code in order to break into the account, then it's not. Yeah, Paul, what do you think?
I have I have a lot to say about this, but I'll try to simplify. I think this is, on the whole, I think this is slightly on the better side, because I see, not that I'm negative or anything, but I tend to see, I look at a change like this and I think, okay, what is the benefit? Now let me think about what's the negative. How can this go bad?
Mhm.
And you kind of touched on it there a second ago. What we've seen in many of these cases where a high profile NPM maintainer has been compromised is they get locked out of their account. And then you have this kind of weird situation where they can't go make productive changes to the bad thing that has now been published by the threat actor. And I'm worried that a blunt instrument like this change will have more negative effect than it will positive. And that's not me just trying to be, armchair quarterback, throwing stuff at NPM. I think that this makes sense at face value, but when you really look at what happens after one of these big ATO style account takeover style compromises, one of the most damaging things that we've seen is when the account maintainer, the legitimate account maintainer, is locked out. Is this change going to make that worse? I hope not. But maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it maybe depends on the order that the threat actors do things in. If they, for example, compromise the package before trying to change an email address, then I could certainly see, like what you're talking about. It makes it more difficult for maintainers to potentially, recover. So I think we'll see, right?
Yeah, and sorry, and one thing I missed there, which I meant to go into detail. So it says that this is going to be a 72-hour read-only state, and you can kind of, forgive the pun, you can kind of read between the lines here and see that they are effectively saying that the maintainer will not be able to make any write changes, and this is where my concern comes from. If everything gets turned, does that mean they can't publish or remove? Can they not make write style changes?
Presumably, yeah. I would assume anything that's not read-only is therefore not achievable. So yeah.
Right. I think then that really kind of opens us up to be, more potentially, cause more harm itself as an automated blunt instrument. And we see that with NPM whenever they do one of these kind of automated things, because NPM doesn't have security staff anymore, because GitHub security staff is threadbare. When one of these automated changes happens, a lot of times the technical people inside the GitHub organization, don't have time or they just can't fix it really quickly. And so then we have a problem where something that's malicious is still out there longer than. The other thing I wanted to point out is that there is a secret flag. There is a secret flag in NPM. You cannot get it from the fire hose. You have to know how to go and look for it. But there is a secret flag that is applied to these important maintainers, and it's on it's not a maintainer flag, it's a package flag. And so if you know where to look for it, you can find that, and then and you can just basically just walk the whole fire hose and find all those flags for the specific packages, and that's your list right there.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. Okay, moving on to the second change that happened at GitHub. This one actually went through the day before the high impact account 72-hour hold thing. And this one is self-service credential revocation for incident response circumstances. And I think there's a couple things to understand about what this is. First, it's only for GitHub Enterprise owners. So not for anybody using GitHub. You have to be subscribing. And it gives you the ability to either revoke a single individual's credentials, all of their creds, or across the entire organization. So it says you can revoke authorizations, delete tokens and SSH keys, list and revoke SSO authorizations, and then individuals will have the ability under the GitHub Enterprise contract as well to review their own credential counts and self-service revoke or delete. And so I think we have a few things to say about this. One, this is a great feature. This is absolutely necessary. We have seen so many examples in the last year where organizations had a lingering credential somewhere that they didn't know about and didn't have a way to find out about. We're seeing vendors create products to address this problem. So no holds barred. This is a good thing. Asterisk, it's a little bit of a bummer that it's only for GitHub Enterprise. And Paul, as we were preparing, you made a little bit of a comment of like, gosh, it's 2026. It's actually a little surprising that it's taken this long.
It just proves that you can take the word enterprise and you can apply it to something, but that does not mean that it was built with the enterprise in mind. And GitHub Enterprise is the perfect example of that. This is a product that evolved out of standard GitHub, which was not, it's not really built for an enterprise. So the fact that in 2026, July 2026, we are now finally getting the ability to do this. I mean, hey, this is like one of the best things they've done, like ever. This is one of the best kind of, mitigation tools they've ever given us. So I'm happy for it, not complaining about it, just wondering why did it take you this long to add something, to something that's called enterprise. Now, here's the other thing. I want people to understand there's a very specific account boundary here that this only applies to credentials that are generated by somebody that's inside the envelope of your enterprise working on an enterprise resource. So this does not bleed over into these people that you've given access to your enterprise. And here's the problem, Jen. I've given you access to my GitHub Enterprise, and you've got a bunch of personal stuff, and then you've got access to enterprise assets, right? You create a pat for some of your personal stuff, but it applies to lots of stuff. I can't go and kill that pat for you, as far as I can tell, and we need more details here. And I'm sure people like, Francois and other people that spend more time looking at this will understand better. But as far as I can tell, just on what they've given us so far, you have a problem here where, somebody's been compromised, but you can only revoke assets that are specific to the enterprise itself. And so what does that mean in terms of them creating their own pats, for example? I don't know.
Yeah, might need a little poking at that to really understand the edges.
Okay, I don't know if I want to test. I'd have to create and pay for an enterprise just to test this. I don't think
Yeah, well, maybe if somebody else out there in the community plays around with it, let us know. Next on our list, we have kind of I don't want to say a weird situation that we ran across this week because it's not unusual, but it bears talking about because it is some not great behavior on behalf of an organization that can cause some harm. So that's the only setup I'm going to give it. You've really been looking at this throughout the week. So why don't you talk us through what you found, what your concerns are about it, what the community should know about it?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background here. Last year, I found some Snyk researchers creating some malicious packages in the ecosystem. And Jen, I just dropped you the
Yeah, I remember that. I will drop that link in the chat.
Yeah, and listen, so basically what happened, last year was that some researchers that work at Snyk created some malicious packages targeting Cursor, specifically 3 packages targeting Cursor. Cursor was not a customer of Snyk. I found them and called them out publicly, and their CTO and a bunch of people came on my LinkedIn page to, tell me how it wasn't really a problem. But like everybody that looks at this, like my group of friends and, the Signal researcher group, like it's a really bad look, right? So
yeah, I was at another vendor when that happened, and there was a lot said in the vendor community as well as the customer community about that behavior.
And I get where this comes from, because having done bug bounty and offensive research, sometimes you get this ability to do things where you're allowed to cross this kind of ethical and legal line, right? But that's very rare. And so what you see now happening is you see certain researchers, acting like they
Get a
acting
little
like
roll out of the screen share. Sorry to distract you, but it got me. One of our LinkedIn users, what? This is crazy shocking.
the only downside to live stuff coming up in the podcast is that I stop and look at it. But yes, very shocking, which was the comment. Yeah, so I mean, what we see is we see a new kind of generation of security researchers not understanding where that moral and ethical line is. And so there's the moral and ethical line, right? Which is, as researchers, we're not supposed to do any harm. Right. So for example, the best example of this, and something I've been railing about for years, is when bug bounty researchers create their payloads inside of their POC, NPM, or Python packages, or whatever the case may be. The kind of, the understood what they can exfil is typically like host name, public IP, maybe system host name, something like that. Maybe username at most, but that's it, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to show to the program team that, hey, we ran this inside your organization, we got this data, we prove impact, so you have to be able to collect a little bit of information, right? But that's where it stops. But you still all the time see bug bounty researchers exfilling all kinds of stuff. Like the most common thing they do is they gank every single environment variable that's running via env.
Well, we talked about this maybe a month ago with the Moika campaign, which may fall further on the naughty side of that trend. But why don't you explain what you found this week?
Yeah, thanks. Jen's bringing me back on center. I just wanted to give that background there because I think it's important. Yeah, I know. So what I found this week is 6 packages published, and they're not hiding their identity, published by a security researcher that's working for a new cybersecurity startup that's in stealth. And basically what those packages do is that they target OpenAI, Anthropic, Vercel, Ollama, and a few others. And they're info stealers. Now, they're careful in those info stealers to not exfil credentials, which is good. But they exfil a bunch of information that it goes beyond, it crosses a line. Basically, what they're ganking a lot of information, pulling stuff out of .git, .ssh. So this is sensitive stuff, even if it's not credentials. And it's pretty obvious that they're doing this, to kind of build some research capability that they can then launch their startup on. But I just want to call it out, and we got a blog post coming. I wanted to call it out because it's our job as security researchers to find the bad things. And it's not our job as security researchers to become the bad guy. And I'm, come at me, bro. I'll be at DEF CON, come at me, and I'm happy to have a very lively conversation with you about this. But this is not good behavior, and we want to call it out, and we're going to do that in our blog post.
All right. We will get that blog post up by the end of the week, I think, and we'll share the link out. Circling back to what we talked about at the top of the episode, I got the flash is what it's called from the FBI about TeamPCP. What's been noted is it's a flash, and I'm sure that stands for something because it's all caps.
Right, it's an acronym.
Yeah, it's an acronym for something. It is in lieu of doing a traditional wanted poster, and I don't know the ins and outs of why they decide to do one versus the other. So the warning here is this is a PDF. Do what you will with the PDF that comes through, but it goes over who TeamPCP is, the behavior that they've been doing, the IOCs that you can look for. So worth taking a look at. Anything else you want to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some good indicators in there, but we have a whole lot more in OSM. So if you want, if you're somebody working in government or law enforcement and you want better data, indicator data, come and talk to us.
Yeah.
Weird plug, but nonetheless.
Okay, for next week, we're excited. We're going to have our first guest on the show. His name is Mikael Barbero. He's the head of security at the Eclipse Foundation. which maybe you haven't heard of them, but you probably have heard of Open VSX, which is one of the projects that the Eclipse Foundation manages. I got to sit down with him this morning to talk about what we'll be discussing on the show. He's very passionate about the foundation and making Open VSX secure. So I think it's going to be super interesting. Something that I learned today, and I wouldn't blame our audience for not knowing this either, but the reason for Open VSX really having a moment right now is actually because all of these AI IDE platforms, they run on VS Code, but they don't use official VS Code extensions for various reasons. And so they have turned to Open VSX. And so that's platforms like Cursor and Windsurf. And so Open VSX is really having a moment in a way that is potentially great for the ecosystem. But as all of these things go, it also is making it an attractive new target for threat actors who want to exploit users of VS Code.
Yeah, I've got a little spiel here. I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. I've been vaguely critical of their organization in the past in terms of security practices. So I'm coming to this with open ears and an open heart. And if I've been wrong about something, I'll definitely cop to it live on air. But I'm excited to help them and be part of the solution. But something I want to segue here is, these registries are great because these registries do have the ability to kind of create some security choke points, which is awesome, which is why you should be using them. Because the reality is that anybody can go and download these VS Code extensions from a GitHub repo or anywhere else, right? They're basically just JavaScript in a proprietary zip format. That's all. And what we're going to start to see is we're going to start to see the same thing happening in the VS Code ecosystem, VS Code extensions ecosystem that we're seeing now with NPM. Bad guys, let me be very clear. We're going to talk about this more in next week's show or maybe the week after that. But in anticipation of V12, the NPM package manager changes that are coming, which, by the way, this is going to roll in not like thunder, but like a whimper because nobody's going to upgrade. But anyhow, that aside, I'm already seeing a shift in the deployment of malware in NPM packages to these other kind of non-install script. And I'm seeing all kinds of unique ways. And I haven't even shared this yet with Jenn. This morning, I got up super early and went through a bunch of them. But we're going to start to see the same kind of things happen in the VS Code ecosystems too. And that's why it's that much more important to use these platforms like Open VSX, where they really are concerned about security and they want to do something about that. So that's important. And they can add that kind of that security layer for us.
Yeah, some color I would love to add on top of that is something you and I have talked about before. People ask us about how scanning happens for various different types of assets. And, you have NPM, you have PyPy. Those are kind of like known locations for specific types of things. But then you have, I guess, things that don't meet the regular mold. You have AI skills and you have extensions where they can just live in any GitHub repository. And that makes it much more difficult for both defenders as well as organizations like us that are doing proactive scanning to find all of the skills and the extensions that are out there. These two things behave in very similar ways, setting aside the fact that one's natural language and the other's code. Where they live, how they're used, they behave similarly. So plus one to what you just said about consuming them through a credible ecosystem. Right. What I learned about Open VSX and what we'll talk about next week gives me hope that it's a good place to start, feeling a bit more trustworthy about what you're consuming. But I guess even if you don't think it's perfect, it's better than just pulling it down off some random GitHub.
Yeah, and frankly, based on some of the things you said that you guys talked about, I feel more confident about Open VSX than I do about the official VS Code marketplace. So there's that.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I'm really looking forward to the conversation next week.
I wish I could be there live for that part of the conversation, but I'm not getting up at 1 a.m. So I'm sorry I won't be. But
yeah, you know, this whole thing where we're more connected because of technology also doesn't change the fact that the Earth is round, and you and I are on very different parts of it.
Right. And humans need, as much as my body tries to pretend like this, another case, humans need sleep.
Humans need sleep. Yes. Okay, we're at about 25 minutes so far. I think we've exhausted this week's agenda. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about before we wrap?
No, I could go like, no, we'll save it for next week when it's a little bit more structured. I do want to get into these new ways that bad guys, because I've got a bunch of screenshots to share with you and stuff like that too as well. So I think it's just watching people be creative. In this case, bad guys, but watching bad guys be creative. It's really fascinating. It's one of the things I love about my job.
Yeah, always saying new things. We may not like the things we see, but it is, if nothing else, it is interesting.
Right.
All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening, people. Appreciate it.